Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katrina Corcoran. I'm the Suncoast Chair-elect. I'm happy to have some fabulous speakers here today with us, and also our event organizer and Hillsborough Area Director, Jennifer Malone. So thank you for joining us, and Jennifer will take it away with introductions for our panelists.
Hi, everyone. Again, thanks for joining. I just want to give a little shout out to Karen Kress. This event series was actually her idea. So if you have any ideas for any events, just reach out to any of us on the Suncoast Executive Committee and we'd be happy to chat and maybe organize one. So our first speaker is Taryn Zavia. She's the Research Associate Professor and Director of the Florida Center for Community and Research at the University of South Florida's School of Architecture and Community Design. Since 2014, she has overseen faculty, researchers, and graduate students to deliver the center's mission to assist the citizens of Florida in creating more livable and sustainable communities. Taryn has advised over 30 mayors on sustainable development and has worked with elected bodies both nationally and internationally. Her professional work has spanned policy legislation for buildings and energy codes, urban transportation systems, implementation of community development block grants, and resiliency and mitigation planning for Florida's municipalities. She serves on several national advisory committees and is a lover of cities. Alana Brazier is the Vision Zero coordinator for the city of Tampa, where she focuses on supporting the development of a safe, well-connected, multimodal transportation network. In this role, she works with within the city's mobility department to coordinate the planning and implementation of multimodal and roadway safety efforts. She is passionate about creating safer places for people to move around the city to support a more livable and sustainable Tampa. And last but not least, Johnny Wong works as a principal planner for the Hillsborough County MPO, managing data and analytics and smart cities programs. Johnny has been happily working for the MPO for 4 years, and he hopes that his planning work allows people of all races, incomes, and abilities to travel with dignity. Before planning, Johnny was in academia and taught economic and political geography courses at the University of South Florida for almost 7 years. While completing his PhD, he still stays up to date on geographic theories and frameworks and seeks to integrate these into his planning work. Please feel free to add any questions to the chat and we'll get to those at the end of all the presentations. And without further ado, I will hand it off to Taryn. If you bear with me while I give control of the screen share. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to cover US cities, and I'll be looking at Seattle, Portland, and if we have time, Boston. So one of my favorite things to do in cities is really to find their character, their personality, their identities, and cities that actually have great plans to incorporate those are some of what we're going to look at tonight. So I'm really excited to say that the photograph here as we open is actually mine, taken from the top of the Space Needle in Seattle. It's not often I get to say that about those big urban views, but that's definitely one of them. So we thought we'd do something a little different in this presentation. And sorry, as I'm trying to, there we go. All right, so wanted to be able to give you the perspective not only of what we might experience in cities, but also the two little ones that are on the left-hand side of your screen. My daughter Tessa, my son Coleman travel with my husband and I a lot. We've taken them around the US and internationally. And so their perspective is one that we try to share a lot, because when we go places, we want to make sure that these places not only have things that are interesting to us as adults, but interesting to them as kids. And so seeing their perspectives for multi-generational cities is something that we really like. So one of the things that Seattle really offers is complete streets, and their complete streets planning is some of the most robust in the country. And we're really looking at how we can go to places and travel car-free. So Seattle definitely provided this opportunity for us. We hopped on, the light rail when we arrived, and then we're out walking, even in the rain, easy to get around, and lots of crosswalks and places for pedestrians. And again, looking at how those complete streets integrate not only the street bed itself, but really create that street room so that we can see what the pedestrian areas and the sidewalk and facade places are like, incorporating architecture as well as other icons along the way. And just to throw in a little example of what they're doing, Seattle has a number of corridors that have concept plans already created. And so they really do have a robust, complete street view of their city. And it's one of the ways that they really take on those urban design challenges from building facade to building facade. So it's that whole street room. And walking around it, you could really see it and feel it. And so looking at that is really something that we found to be noticeable. And that is what you'll see in a lot of the photos. So bus only lanes, bike lanes, wide sidewalks. You know, our little ones were a little too small to be able to partake in bike share at the time. So they also, you know, we looked for all modes of transit. So every mode that we can ride in a city, we're on it. This is the monorail. It'll take you to the center. It'll take you to the Space Needle. And it gives you a pretty good view from above of the street. And worked into these complete street programs and concepts are also some of their pop-ups and temporary uses and other tactical urbanism components. So from the planters that help to create those separated bike lanes to pop-up plazas, you know, just around and outside of the center. And a favorite of theirs is the Space Needle, not only because it provided a really fantastic view, but also because of the park below. And so this park is just outside of the ground level of the Space Needle. The kids had a fabulous time, and they also met some other kids from Alaska. Now they have longtime pen pals. Which was really a fun experience for them and for us. And again, those views from the top of the Space Needle. So this was something which really did give that panoramic view around Seattle, being able to not only see some of those urban places, but out to the natural environment and the water as well. And then back on the monorail. So really some great views that the monorail provided as we went through the city, and also through and under some of those architectural elements that they had at the museums. And, you know, the conductor was pretty awesome because let the kids blow the horn and sit right up in the front. So we also took the ferry out to Bainbridge Island. This was a really great experience. There were a lot of soccer fans that were coming back with us. Great views from the water. And I will say the one thing that we noticed, which was so much different than Florida, is that when the kids fell asleep on the ferry, carrying them back up the hills to the hotel was definitely a challenge. And one of the best ways for us to really get to know the personality of a city is, you know, again, to walk it as much as possible. And something that Seattle really focuses on is their walking routes. And you can actually, this is just a still of a portion of it, but these are live maps that you can go to on the city's website, and you can actually look at and find a whole series of walking routes through the urban core. It's pretty phenomenal because it really does give everyone a sense of, you know, ways to get around the city. The dotted lines show where there are different stairs, you know, so that you can traverse that topography. And we decided to make fun with our walking tour. And so we, when you think of Seattle, you think of coffee. We couldn't really do a coffee tour with the kids. We didn't want to hype them up on that. So we decided to go to chocolate instead. Chocolate Indulgence Walking Tour was a super hit. And second to coffee in Seattle is chocolate. They have a long history of chocolate. They have over 50 chocolatiers in the city. And in addition to being able to walk around and do a 2-hour walking tour, stopping at 15 different locations and really getting to see the city, we also got a really great history of chocolate and how chocolate has really become this big component of Seattle's personality. And so we filled them with chocolate for 2 hours. These cream pies were some of the best. And of course, from a James Beard award-winning chef, one would expect it. And as the tour continued, again, we got to see a variety of places, everything from kind of the urban neighborhoods and urban streetscapes to Pike's Place Market, where we had fabulous hot chocolate, to some of the alleyways that are just outside it, and Fran's Chocolate Shop, which is on the kind of higher end of the chocolate manufacturing that we have in Seattle. And at the bottom is the Barack Obama special box that you can get when you visit. That was made for him when he was there. And to just, kind of bring Seattle together, I think some of those great urban design pieces really do flow throughout the city. So you're looking at the way they integrate walkability into the topography, having some of the iconic architectural pieces that are really woven into that street fabric and the way that they integrate with the edges and the sidewalks, and then the multimodal components with a focus on their bike network. And of course, more transit, and that'll be a theme that you see throughout. I do have lots of transit photos. Love to take every type of transit when we go to the cities. And so having those live times as well as easy fares is really great. And then again, this was the same trip. We went from Seattle to Portland and we took the train. It's about just over 3 hours. And we took that train from Seattle and brought everyone into Portland. And one of the really exciting pieces of Portland is that they have a really fabulous design guideline. That it's been around for a long time, and they really do emphasize the character or themes for Portland. And it is part of that urban design vision for the city. And you can see it really come out. So from transit stops to street signs to sculptures to everything that you see on the ground in terms of manhole covers, right, are all branded with these different themes that really work within that urban environment. And so one of the other pieces they have and things that they focus on, right, you'll see a lot of the blue Huron, the idea of mountain views, the natural environment, rain, and some of those are integrated in and around the streetscapes. And so we made a special deal with the kids, and we wanted them to understand how important some of these pieces actually were to the overall personality of Portland. So we told them that for every one of these themes that they could pick out, that we would give them a quarter. By day 2, we said no more manhole covers, and by day 3, we were out about 120 bucks. So they did a great job, and they are everywhere. So including their fountains. And when we got to Portland, we also met up with a group of my students from the University of South Florida. So these are all architecture and urban design students that are kind of back here in the background. And one of the things that we do when we do big tours of cities is we want to find those elements that really stand out. And so for Portland, it's the park blocks. And those park blocks really do create a center spine that goes up the city from the South Park blocks all the way through the North Park blocks. If you're familiar with Portland, Pioneer Courthouse Square kind of sits at about the center or so between them. And we were able to take the group and park hop all the way. And it was about an 8-mile day, and there was not one complaint. I would say that my youngsters did better than some of my college students. And they were able to, again, keep going. It was really quite fun to go from park to park and square to square. It was chilly when we were there. This was March, and so you can see, you know, the fountains are not on or running, but you could still go to the different squares and parks. This is what it looks like in the summer. And again, Pioneer Courthouse Square, which is really one of the centerpieces of the city. It is at the center of the city. It's where all the transit comes in and out. And then, you know, looking at that, you know, the difference between the old squares and then the new squares like Director Park. But again, still having the idea of connecting to those themes, including water. And this is pretty fun too. Again, still on that park hop. So you go by the Alder Street food cart pod. So this is an entire block surrounded by food trucks. It's pretty amazing. There's a lot of energy there.
Hey, Taryn, we have about you have about a minute and 30 left. About.
Perfect. Thank you. So as we go through Portland, you'll see that the city's really anchored with the Portland University at the south, and then you have the Pearl District to the north, which is also another one of their big transit hubs. So, and again, looking at all of these parks and utilizing stormwater capture to really create amenities within the Pearl District. And again, here's what it looks like when it's warm out and in the summer. And then that theme continues all the way through. And then this is again our transit ride back going down to the waterfront, which is the new South Waterfront District in Portland. And the way that they incorporate the idea of rain and water in their themes is through all of these beautiful rain gardens. So these rain gardens are along the edges of all of the new development. They're pretty spectacular. You can see how they integrate them along the walkways and then moving out all the way to the waterfront as well. And it's pretty amazing because this is, you know, still within that urban core, and you have those really beautiful environments. So back on transit we go. You know, they talk about the history through a core sample that's within one of their transit stations. And we went out to the Japanese gardens. So it's about a 15-minute ride outside, and you're in this incredible natural vista. And this was our very lousy attempt at showing our kids snow for the first time. We failed miserably. But the things that I really do want to leave you with here is so Loretta Jean's pies are some of the best in the country that I've ever had. She's got a few locations, but there's this really fabulous small one that's tucked in the corner of a parking garage if you're there. And then in terms of libations, the Whiskey Library is pretty phenomenal. And they have 2 levels. It's like a library inside, except with all whiskey. So those are pretty fun places. So my time's almost up. My last one was Boston, and it's the Freedom Trail. And so if anyone's familiar, Boston does a fabulous job of really integrating history and contemporary culture. And so everywhere you look, it's really this juxtaposition of the old and the new. This was a really great walking tour that we did. And we were excited because it was all based around Charles Bulfinch, who was the first architect in the US. So the kids got a kick out of that since mom and dad are architects. But again, just some views of that old and new and how they work together to really help create that personality in Boston. And that's it.
Thank you so much. I love the emphasis on traveling with your kids, and that's really special, and I really enjoyed hearing that. So next we have Alana Brasher.
Okay, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. So again, I'm Alana Brazier. I'm a transportation planner with the City of Tampa. I'm the newly hired Vision Zero coordinator. So I've been here in this role at the city for about 4 months. But this has really influenced why I wanted to talk about Copenhagen, because Copenhagen really influenced my passion, furthered my passion in biking and transit, and just how the transportation network can really help create a livable, sustainable, and fun city. So I've titled my presentation Getting Hygge in Copenhagen. For those of you who don't know what hygge means, it is the Danish word for a form of everyday togetherness, a pleasant and highly valued everyday experience of safety, equality, personal wholeness, and a spontaneous social flow. And also creating cozy and convivial atmospheres that promote well-being. So that gives you a little idea of what they're getting at with that. And I think, that's partly why the Danes are always regarded as the happiest people in the world. So there's a little bit that we can probably learn from them. And these are photos from 2 trips actually that were taken back in 2015 and 2016. So it's been quite a while now, but it was nice to take a little trip down memory lane and feel little pangs of remorse that we can't yet travel. But once we're able to get back to Denmark, I can't wait to go back to Copenhagen. So being a transportation planner, of course, I'm going to start out from the transportation side of things. So they have every mode of transportation you can think of. This was from my first trip. This is my husband, Justin Willits. He's a heart planner, so transit planner at our transit agency. So we were both getting to nerd out, just like Taryn and Adam get to when they're the 2 architects on their trips. We're nerding out over transit and bikes. In this particular picture, we took a train from Berlin all the way to Copenhagen. And this train, we didn't even know this was going to happen, but it drove onto a ferry. And then we all got off the train, and the ferry took us, I forget the body of water it took us across, but it ferried us across. They're in the process of building an enormous tunnel that is crazy, so the trains can actually continue on underwater, so they don't have to do this ferry business anymore. But we thought it was pretty cool and just an exciting little thing that happened that we weren't even aware was going to, and we almost missed getting back on our train. But that's another story for another day. This is the train station when you arrive in Copenhagen. So of course it's a beautiful old brick building. And then this is what you see when you walk out of that train station. So there's bikes everywhere, just everywhere across the whole city. So obviously that's the primary mode of transportation actually is bicycles there. So you'll be seeing a lot of that in my presentation here. They just have a lot of really great infrastructure there. It's given, I think the photo on the right is really indicative of how much they prize providing space for people on bikes. So you can see on the far right is the sidewalk, and then there's a little step down, and then there's this really wide bike lane, then another little step down, and then that goes into a bus lane. And then there's only actually 2 vehicle travel lanes on this corridor. So you can see how they're really prioritizing other modes of transportation rather than just, using this whole thing for just vehicle usage. And then, of course, there's just bikes lining every road, but there's bike lanes on every road too. Even, you know, these smaller, more local roads have these huge bike lanes on them. So it just, again, just shows you the priority that's given, and building that infrastructure really encourages people then to get out and use that as their primary modes of transportation. And, you know, in Florida, we always have the excuses of, well, it gets too hot in the summer, but in Copenhagen, it gets really cold and snows, but those people are biking year round. They bike in high heels from work. They bike their kids to preschool and school and just everywhere. So it's really cool to see that culture. And just more examples of infrastructure for bicycles and pedestrians. So this is a bridge that connects different parts of the city. So you can see they've really delineated where people are supposed to be walking and people are supposed to be biking. So it makes it a really safe environment for everyone. And this photo on the right was during bike rush hour, which we got to enjoy, which is kind of a scary experience too. And this is a really cool bike bridge that was, it was under construction the first time we went to Copenhagen. It was done the second time. So Copenhagen's got a lot of bodies of water all around it. And this bridge in particular, it's only for bikes and pedestrians. And that yellow piece that you see in the middle, it actually, when a boat needs to pass through, that yellow piece actually moves towards where you see us standing. So it moves away, opens up that gap for boats to pass through, and then closes back up so the bicyclists and pedestrians can keep going. And this is a little video, not a good one, so I'll skip it. But this is another good one because this is one of the biggest arterials that goes through Copenhagen, and still there's a lot of lanes of traffic, but you see a wide bike lane and a lot of people biking. And, you know, even though there's a lot of lanes of traffic and cars, I would still feel very safe biking on that. And I did bike on it. And last little bit on bikes, it's also the little things that help support people to choose to bike around. So we have some covered bike parking. They even have a green roof on top of it. And then you can see on the right this staircase. So they have this little metal piece where instead of carrying your bike up the stairs, you can just roll it up the stairs. So it's all those little details that just make it a little more accommodating for people. And then, as I mentioned, Copenhagen has got a lot of bodies of water. So there's a lot of canals, and boats are also a big aspect of this city. So this is in Nyhavn. You could probably recognize all those colored buildings. It's kind of the iconic little street that people think of when they think of Copenhagen. So they have a lot of boat tours that get on or load up at this section. And there are a bunch of cute little houseboats. This one is just so cool. I just love the little wood panels and all the windows. It must be really amazing inside. And then they have these little boats they called go boats that you could rent. So similar to what we have here in Tampa, e-boats. And you could rent them, take them all around through the canals. So we did that. And it's just another great perspective of the city, and got to see a lot from that perspective. And then there's a lot of really cool places to go and attractions to see in Copenhagen too. This is, I think it's called Torvehallerne, if I remember correctly. I'm totally butchering the pronunciation, but this is it was an old warehouse space that they turned into an indoor market that has all sorts of artisan foods, baked goods, coffee. So food is another big component of life in Denmark and Copenhagen in particular, and I'll get to that in a minute. Tivoli Gardens is an old amusement park that's right in the middle of the city. It's actually right across from the large train station. So we got to go explore that. It's a lot of fun. Really old roller coasters that probably wouldn't be allowed in the US, but they were really fun. And that's actually on the right side. You can see the tall swing that goes around. That's right across from the train station. So we did that at nighttime, which was terrifying. And then I think this place might be closed now, which is unfortunate because it was my favorite part, I think, of Copenhagen. It's called Papirøen. It was a former paper factory that turned into another food market, indoor food markets. They had a bunch of stalls, basically like food trucks, but inside. So they had seating inside, but a bunch of seating outside. So you could bike over, just really spend a day there. They had all these chairs that they put out that looked over the water. You can see this lady is taking a nice little snooze, being very hygge there. And then Christiania is a very interesting place. If you ever make it to Copenhagen, you have to go because it's basically its own little city within a city. It's a commune that I think back in the 70s, a group of hippies said they wanted to create their own little city. And so they're actually have I think their own little form of government. The Copenhagen police can't really come in and police them. So it's very artistic, eclectic place. There's a lot of other activities that go on that I won't get into, but it's definitely worth seeing. And then I forget the name of this church right now, but if you look closely on the spire, you can see this outside railing because you can climb to the very top of it. And it was also another terrifying experience because once you get to the top, you can actually feel the spire waving a little bit. But you get this incredible view, so you can see so much of Copenhagen. So it's definitely worth it. And then the food. So back to the food, of course, you know, what's vacation if you're not eating a bunch of food? And Copenhagen is one of the best places for food because they have, I think it's been nominated the best restaurant in the world, probably like 10 years in a row. It's called Noma. They have 13 or 14 Michelin starred restaurants, which is like, it's a big honor to have a Michelin, even one Michelin star. They have restaurants with numerous Michelin stars. For comparison, the United States as a whole has, I think, about 14 restaurants. So this one city has just as many of those high-level restaurants as we do in our entire country. So even those high-end restaurants, that love of food trickles down to the food carts. Everything is just amazing. So even if you can't afford to go to Noma, you're going to be able to get really good food from the food trucks too. And just more pictures of food because that's fun. They have these really cool sandwiches that are open face sandwiches. I forget another Danish term for them, but this was just a beautiful case of some of those. And then we took a day trip over to Malmo, Sweden, so you can hop on a train. I think it's like an hour or hour and a half long train ride, and you can pop over to Sweden, which is a great little day trip. And this is their central station when you get over to Malmo. And I just love the grouping of the old historic station on the right with the brick, with the more modern piece of it on the left. And maybe someday our Union Station will look a little more like this when we get Brightline. Wouldn't that be cool? So these are some pictures from the streets of Malmo. So pretty much every street there is the Wiener style of street, so where it's all one level. So everyone is just going very slowly in vehicles. It's really pretty much a walking city. It's very, very old and historic too.
Alana, just about like a minute or two left.
Okay, almost done. And then last stuff, just those weird, whimsical, and memorable things that you see on trips. So Copenhagen is full of them. This is a picture of part of Christiania from the water. So there's this trailer that someone lives in that's just painted rainbow colors. They had these really cool bike trails that were just basically these big ramps that you could go ride up and down. They didn't take you anywhere. They were just meant for you to play on. And they also, we stumbled upon these little trampolines, so you could just hop on them. Again, I don't think anything like that would be allowed here in the US for liability purposes, but still fun to experience that over there. And then second to last slide, this was the view from our Airbnb, and you can see there's this little diving platform so people can go jump off of that and go swimming. They have, obviously, of course, they'll have very clean water. They also, over here on the left side, they have this little trailer that's like a sauna. So the water's cold, of course, so you can go sit in the sauna and warm up after you've jumped in the water. And then last little thing, this is what we saw at Papuruan. This band on a boat just pulled up and started playing randomly. That's it.
Thank you so much. I really, Tivoli Gardens is on my bucket list. I'm pretty jealous you got to go, but I also really enjoyed those trampolines. So that was very, very, very awesome. So Johnny Wong is our last presenter on Belize.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro, Jennifer. I'm Johnny Wong. I'm a transportation planner at the Hillsborough MPO, and I am a finalist for Planner of the Year 2021. Anyway, Jennifer and Karen invited me to come talk about my trip to Belize, and I was really excited to tell people about it because when I tried to tell my friends, they didn't seem super excited to hear it, but I'm glad that I have a captive audience. So just for a little bit of background, my wife and I decided to go to Belize in 2019 as a backup plan. Originally, we wanted to go to South Africa, but for some reason or another, that kind of fell through. And we also wanted to go on a place that was not too far from home, so we decided to stay in this hemisphere. And we kind of settled on Belize almost by like spinning a globe and putting our finger on it, and wherever it lands is where we're going. It turned out to be a great trip. Belize is just like a really short flight from Tampa. For a little bit of geographical context, Belize is in Central America. Most people know that, but specifically, it's on the eastern side of the Yucatan. This part that I'm hovering over right now is Mexico, and the eastern portion of it faces the Atlantic. From what I could tell, and based on what I've read since having traveled there, the country is kind of split into two populations. So the eastern coast is way more urban, way more densely populated. The population there hails from, or I guess they would consider themselves to be like Afro-Caribbean. And as you move westward through the country, it gets way more rural. The population is dominated by like agriculture, so you're driving through a lot of farms, and the population itself is a blend of Mayan and Spanish. They might call themselves mestizo, which is just basically Spanish mixed with whatever indigenous population. And this is the only country in Central America where the official language is English. So that teaches you a little bit about its colonial history. And I actually learned a lot about the colonial history. Most of our trip was in San Ignacio. That was the red star that I put here. It's right on the border of Guatemala, and it's an old Mayan civilization. There were a ton of tour guides around who were more than happy to talk to us about history dating back to the Maya, but also shared a little bit of insight about what happened in, I guess, more modern history. Mayan, like if you would have asked me before I did trip to Belize, the Maya always seemed like an ancient society, like way back in the day. But I found out that the Mayan civilization existed in Belize up until like the 1600s. The population was dying off just at the turn of the century, mostly because of climate change and some migrations. So that's kind of like a nod to Earth Day. But when Spanish settlers arrived in the 1700s, they literally put a nail in the coffin. Almost as soon as the Spanish explorers arrived, the Mayan population died off from disease. And like I said, they put a nail in the coffin, quite literally, because we know how brutal the Spanish style of colonialism was. But through the 1700s, or throughout the 1700s, there was a battle between the Spanish imperialists and the British colonizers. So it was a contested territory for almost 200 years. And once Britain took control of it, they turned the eastern coast, where Belize City is, into a slave outpost. And things stayed like that for a really long time until finally the country gained its independence fully from Britain, like 30 years after World War II, which was very interesting to me because Britain lost almost all of its colonial territories immediately after World War II. I was pretty fascinated to hear that they held control of this little place in Central America for an additional 30 years. Alana and Taryn clearly traveled like planners. Me, not so much. I mean, I was there to have a good time, so I didn't really get pictures of like bike racks and things like that. There's a few, but I'll include those more to the end. Most of what I knew about the country, I acquired while I was there from tour guides and then reading about it in like academic articles afterward. But while I was there, I note of a few things that kind of relate back to the topic of the travel log. And, you know, even though I was only there for like 4 days, I was able to identify some planning-based needs in Belize. The first thing that I noticed is environmental/tourism, second, economic, and third, something that I'm going to call post-colonial, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. When I talk about environmental, I don't mean ecological. I don't have any idea about the ecology of Belize other than it's like right along the equator and I stayed pretty much in a rainforest. I mean environmental, and you can kind of understand what I mean when you combine that with tourism. I pulled this quote from TripAdvisor, which I think is really illuminating of the situation in Belize. The quote goes, "It's true, parts of Belize are getting touristy, but San Ignacio, where I stayed, remains rustic, making it a great base for budget-friendly tropical adventure travel. Canoe on the Makal River or walk to Mayan ruins at Kahal Pek. Just be warned, it's uphill." So based on this quote, you can kind of tell that the author is creating this false dichotomy between traditional tourism and what I guess they mean as like the preferable cousin of that, the adventure travel. We did canoe on a river. We did visit the Mayan ruins. So I'm criticizing myself and my own travel preferences. But it was tough to draw the distinction between what you would consider traditional touristy stuff and this notion of adventure travel. My wife and I did all of those things and more. So I'm being kind of sympathetic in offering my critiques. I really do hope that this notion of ecotourism doesn't dominate the economy moving forward and that they don't have to rely on foreign dollars to support themselves. But this is a river that was right along the place that we stayed at in San Ignacio. You can see it's gorgeous. I mean, this river is like totally beautiful. The water is super cold, even though we were there like in the summer. And you can see the lush landscape, the rock, the cliff faces and everything. It looks amazing. This is a picture of us hiking in one of the Mayan archaeological sites. This one's called Zunantinich. It's clear from visiting these places that tourism employs a ton of people in this part of the country. I mean, if you pull up to any of these like touristy locations, the ruins, or if you want to go kayaking on the river, there's no shortage of people that are just standing on the street kind of hailing tourists to come hire them. like a private guided tour or something like that. Also, there's a ton of roadside vendors everywhere hawking trinkets and like items that you might pick up at a gift shop otherwise. This guy to the left is not our tour guide. I don't really know what he's doing there. So moving on, this is like the second part of what I noticed. So the economy could use a considerable amount of planning. We were in like a little bit of a rundown section of San Ignacio, just walking the streets, and I took this picture. It's like Caribbean twist on English. People, they suffer out here. And I take that to mean that people are suffering. I'm not like knowledgeable in Belizean or anything, but I really thought that that was pretty dramatic because the place that we stayed was like perfect landscape. The country looks beautiful, but clearly the people living in these small towns, they're not reaping the benefits. Unless you're like a very successful tour guide, you're probably not getting a lot of the money that's flowing into the country. So one of the things that I noticed is that the relic of colonialism is like everywhere you go. Anywhere that I looked, I could identify it. After I got home, I looked it up and discovered that Belize is considered a tier 2 economy by the World Bank. And according to the UN, the economy ranks somewhere in the 180s out of like 200 countries comprising the UN. So they've clearly got a lot of challenges that they need to address. This picture of a mountain looks really beautiful. Driving through the countryside, it's evident how much land is actually allocated toward agriculture. So when I was driving, I looked at it and I thought, oh, wow, that's beautiful. That's like untouched, pristine nature. But when you zoom in, you can kind of tell that there are a few trees scattered around, but most of this is what I presume to be like sugarcane or maybe banana crops mixed in. A lot of the landscape has been torn up by these agricultural operations, and it's pretty stark. Another element of the economy that could use a lot of planning is infrastructure, which is almost non-existent, especially when you compare it to what Alana experienced in Copenhagen. I mean, the Belize road network is like, I don't know, awful. Maybe that's even being a little bit generous. Infrastructure, based on what I can tell, seems to be a huge limiting factor to economic growth. Just about all the roads that we traveled on look like this, if not much, much worse. In fact, we were driving up a mountain trying to get to this cave destination, and we rented a 2-wheel drive Jeep Patriot. And I was kind of cheaping out. I had the opportunity to rent a more expensive 4-wheel drive, but I went with the Jeep Patriot. And halfway up the mountain, discovered that I just wasn't going to clear the landscape. So I had to reverse all the way back down on this very narrow road while trying not to fall off the side of the cliff. This bridge is another good example of deteriorating infrastructure. You can kind of see it from the picture here. Before I drove over it, I got out of the car and wanted to walk it just to assess how strong it was. And I mean, I was able to lift some of these beams up. They're actually not riveted or connected to the support beams anyway. They're just kind of loosely laid out. So if you wanted to, you could probably lift them up with your hand and move them, which was a cause for concern for me because I opted not to get the insurance on the Jeep Patriot. Speaking of which, I have a little video I'm going to show you. It's definitely not a given that bridges will exist everywhere. We had to do a lot of river crossings on our trip. But that bridge actually was the first one that I saw the entire visit, and it had been raining, so a lot of the trails were just washed out or underwater. And my wife kind of pans over to the side of the road, and you can get an idea of how rocky the roads are. It looks like this was just a mountain that was maybe busted up with dynamite, and people use that to commute back and forth to their jobs. Whoops. Let me go back. Got some other stuff to show you. One other thing I wanted to say about that video know, like some of my friends who might be watching this right now know that I like to go off-roading in my spare time, but bouncing around on a road like that gets old real quick. So even though we were there for 4 days, it felt like much longer because my stomach was like queasy from traveling even 30 minutes down the road. It's enough to make you sick. But that's pretty typical of colonies like Belize in the late stages of the British Empire. Just to go on like a little bit of an educational tangent, it's very sad because it's that way in a lot of former colonial territories, and you can chalk it up to like the thoughts that the British Empire had about these places. If you don't really care that much about the people in a country and you only care about its resources, you probably choose to not invest in infrastructure that can improve the lives of the people. You probably choose to make investments so that you can extract more resources and make more money for your country, right? So that kind of explains why Belize City, right along the coast, the slavery outpost, is really dense and built up. It has, I don't want to say a lot, but way more amenities than the rest of the country. And that's where most of the British folks spent their time. And that kind of colonial history presents a real challenge, like a real challenge to the country. And I'm not sure that anyone has figured out how to solve that riddle. The challenge is like, how do you grow an economy of a relatively newly independent nation while also ensuring that the growth is evenly distributed, not just in Belize City where most of the population is, but also in places like where we visited, San Ignacio. So I don't want to leave you all on a low note. So I took a few pictures of things that I think can offer hope to folks who may want to travel to Belize or folks who are more familiar with the history of the country. You can't really see it all that well here. I had my wife take a picture while I was driving on maybe the only highway that goes east to west. On either side of the road right here is a bus shelter. I thought that was pretty interesting that a country as low income as Belize has only covered bus shelters. I didn't see any just benches out there to pick people up. Every shelter or every stop that I saw had a shelter, which was pretty cool. While we were traveling, we also saw a lot of folks riding like pretty expensive race bikes on this highway. Probably because this is the only really smooth flat surface that goes east to west for many miles. But I thought that was pretty interesting that Belize is able to attract race teams to the country. And lastly, this is in Belize City. I just thought this was funny to anybody who's from the South. This is a knockoff Publix supermarket. And you know, being from Tampa, I had to take that picture. I guess that's pretty much the end. This is a view from the top of Zunantanich, which is one of the Mayan archaeological sites we visited. It's really cool because as you look out over the horizon, you can see pretty much all of Guatemala. All these places down here that look like small villages are old outposts from when the Mayan civilization was at its height. Only the folks who had a lot of prestige, like either due to religion or maybe the wiser elder leaders, were able to stay in the ruins. Everyone else just like spread across this landscape. And I think at the height of the Mayan civilization, there were like 2 million people occupying this general territory, which was really cool to find out. And I think that's about it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Johnny. That was really interesting history about the Mayan civilization, and I really got a kick out of that knockoff Publix at the end. So thank you so much. For our attendees, I've put the CM number in the chat, so this is eligible for 1 CM credit. We really appreciate you joining us today, and I just have a few questions. My first question is for Taryn, if she's still available. We loved that you emphasized children, planning for your children and traveling with your children. Was there, have they ever mentioned their favorite amenities or architectural features from travel? Is there something from Tampa that is there something that they would like to see from their travel in Tampa?
That's a great question. So I would tell you that they have a few favorite things. They love seeing parks, particularly parks that pop up like a surprise in an urban area. So pocket parks are one of their favorite things to look for. And they love transit, trains. We've also taken them to Amsterdam and Paris, and they could navigate the Paris subway when we were there. So they think that it's a great way to travel. They would prefer not to get in a car, and if they had a train option, they would be there every second.
I'm jealous your kids got to go to Paris before I did. I didn't get to go till I was almost 30. So
The Seattle Portland was a great way to start that, because the 3-hour train ride between the cities is very similar to the 3-hour high-speed train ride between Amsterdam and Paris.
yes, very cool. So Alana, what is one thing from Copenhagen that you think could be realistically implemented locally? And I also have a question about if you would ever move to Denmark.
I'll answer the first question or the second question first. Yes, I obviously did some research into how to move to Denmark. It is very hard though, so I don't know if that's in my future. Maybe someday. For your first question, I think what's interesting about their history is that in the 60s and 70s, they were kind of heading down a very auto-oriented path, and the citizens revolted essentially and said, we don't want to go that way. And instead, they started really investing in multimodal infrastructure. And that's how they got to where they are today. So it took them a few decades, but it's a very safe city to travel around. So, I think, and particularly in my role, culture change is a big part of getting to where they're at. And it's not like that can happen overnight, but the more events and the more accommodations we make for people who are doing something other than driving, I think it helps move us in that direction. And we've already gotten a good start. A lot has happened over 10 years, but I'd just like to see us start building more of that infrastructure, so more connected bike lanes, connecting the dots on all of that. So, you don't start biking and a bike lane ends.
Right. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that, especially for sidewalk infrastructure as well. So, and Johnny, I think this is not necessarily planning related, but we were wondering what kind of food did you eat when you were traveled in Belize? I think you were one of our only presenters that didn't touch on the local cuisine.
Mostly Caribbean. There was a lot of plantains, as you can imagine. It's tough to say exactly what their diet is. I think a lot of what we ate was kind of tailored to Western taste. Not to say that Belize isn't Western, but they know that people coming there want to eat a lot of fried food probably. So we had fried jacks, which is like a fried bread. Stewed okra was on the menu almost every day. Lots of tropical fruits. We don't drink, so I can't tell you what the cocktails are like, but I would imagine it has a lot in common with probably like some variety of Mexican cuisine and Caribbean.
Very interesting. Yeah, that was definitely, and how long did it take you to get over there? It was probably a course of several flights, correct?
Yeah, we flew from Tampa to Houston to Belize. I think flight to Houston's like 2 hours maybe, and then to Belize probably another 4 if I'm not mistaken. Seemed pretty short.
Yeah, very cool. Well, if we don't have any more questions from our attendees, I will conclude the Travelogues Volume 2. We really appreciate everyone joining us tonight, and I'm big thank you to our presenters, Alana, Johnny, and Taryn. I learned a lot, as we always do on these. So thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.